So our next speaker and last for the morning is Dr. Frédéric Maillard, Research Director at CNRS, who obtained a PhD in Physical, Theoretical, and Analytical Chemistry for University of Poitiers in France, then followed by a postdoctoral position at the University of Munich in Germany. And he joined CNRS in 2005 as a permanent researcher at the LEPMI laboratory in Grenoble Alpes University. And since 2018, he's a research director at CNRS. And more recently, he's the head of the electrochemistry at the interface and processes group in the lab. And his topics are mainly focused on the electrochemistry, electrocatalysis, and solid liquid interfaces, tackling different electrodes of different systems, including fuel cell and electrolyzers. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for attending this talk today. Well, it's my great pleasure to present a two-year research effort that we have been doing in collaboration with CEA and ESRF. And that brings me to the people who contributed very much to this work. Clément Atlan is a second-year PhD student. So he did a lot in making all the algorithms and all the data processing, and actually it's a valuable work he did. Corentin Chatelier is a postdoc working in the group also of Marie-Ingrid Richard, who is leading this work. And Corentin was helping with DFT calculations. He also did a lot. Isaac Martins should be acknowledged also for this work, for his unique ability in expressing very difficult concepts in a very clear and concise manner. And Arnaud Viola is a postdoc in my group, and Bruno Gilles, these two people helped in the preparation of the nanoparticles and the electrochemistry. Okay, so let me start by thermodynamics. What we learned actually, and what we were learned, that the equilibrium shape of the platinum nanoparticle is determined by the minimization of the surface energy. And that actually for a phase center cubic structure, you would get like 111 and 001 facet mostly, because those facets minimize the surface free energy. So this is why for particle like 5 nanometer in size that we are using in fuel cell, you have this 111 and 100 facet. And there will be a transition to a icosahedron when you go below a certain size, which was roughly estimated to be 1 nanometer. There you have only 101 facet. But I mean, this is true for 0K, and this is true for vacuum conditions. And these are conditions which are very far of what we are doing in gas phase catalysis or what we are doing in electrocatalysis. Let me show you, for example, what happens when you change the environment, and these are the associated changes in morphology. So cubic platinum nanoparticles turn to be like more rounded under hydrogen, and these changes are reversible, and this is basically the same particle under oxygen again. So some facets are just shrinking, some other are just expanding, right? And so thermodynamics cannot give you any insight into this. Now I'm just shifting to the very same subject. Essentially, these are the associated changes in lattice constant. So in a fuel cell, so we had a lot of talk this morning about this. Essentially, when you enter the surface oxide formation region, the lattice constant is also changing. So, for example, starting from this potential that we call the potential of zero total charge, essentially this is the potential at which the surface bears a zero surface charge density and increasing the electrode potential. So you make the metal surface more and more positive, and you start to attract first the anions, and then secondly, you start to absorb OH species on the surface. And so what you see is that essentially the particle is like breathing. So the lattice constant is expanding. And it's very striking that also you can mimic this hysteresis that we have between surface oxide formation and reduction. And here you see like this same hysteresis in the lattice constant variation as a function of the electrode potential. So these things were confirmed here at ID31 on platinum nanoparticles and palladium nanoparticles. And essentially, here on this beautiful graph, you see that at the potential of zero total charge, you will have a certain lattice constant, which is probably close to what you would get without any electrochemical potential. And then there is a variation of the lattice constant as a function of the electrode potential. So here in this region, you will get the absorption of bisulfite anions, because those data have been done. So it will be perchoric here in this case. These data have been obtained in perchoric acid. And here you will probe the surface oxide. And here you will probe the hydrogen species that are on the surface. So from the slope, you can get insight into the nature of the species that are absorbed on the surface. When we started this work like 2 years ago, it was like a dream to be able to map the strain distribution because the morphology, but also the strain on particles have a strong influence on the rate of electrocatalytic reaction. So first, we wanted to know whether we could map the strain distribution. And there we were wondering if the strain essentially is homogeneously distributed on the surface, or if it will depend on the correlation number. Do we have the same strain, for example, here, and on this facet? Do we have the same strain on this corner and on this top facet? Well, essentially, to get insight into this, we use Bragg coherent diffraction imaging. So this is not a new technique. It was developed at the beginning of the 2000s, but thanks to the ESRF EBS source, now it becomes possible to work on a single platinum nanoparticle and to study the very same particle in situ operando, so under catalytic reaction conditions. So how does it work? Well, essentially, we place the sample onto a very precise translation rotation stage where the particle has been previously aligned. We are in Bragg conditions. And then we slightly vary the incident angle while keeping the detector position constant. So we vary this by very small steps in the range of 0.1 degree. And we call this a rocking curve. And what you get is a series of diffraction patterns that are stitched together to give the 3D Bragg peak intensity. So since in a real crystal, the atoms are slightly out of their equilibrium position, essentially the structure factor is a complex number. So it means that from this complex number, you can extract the amplitude to get insight into the morphology of the particle. And you can use also the phase, the projection of the atomic displacement onto the scattering vector. And there you can get insight into the strain distribution. So obviously, as I have mentioned, there's lots of computational processes. And here I should greatly acknowledge people from ID1 who developed this algorithm, the BCDI Python package and the Pionex Python package. So they did a lot for this work. We work on model platinum nanoparticles that we obtain by deweighting a thin film. So we deweight this thin film at 750 degrees for 10 hours. We can control more or less the size of the particle by changing the temperature of thermal annealing or by changing the duration of the thermal annealing. Well, in the end, what we get on the surface, we have particles 300 nanometer in size, smaller, larger, and this is kind of convenient because then we can choose which particle is best adapted to our experimental conditions. CV is a state of the art, so you have seen a lot this morning, so you are becoming expert in platinum electrochemistry. So we have this adsorption desorption feature of platinum, oxygen adsorption desorption features. And what we were interested in was this potential region where essentially the cyclic thermogram is kind of flat. There is not so much variation in current in this region as a function of the electrode potential. And as I've already mentioned, this is the region into which you start to make the electrode surface a little bit more positive, and you start to attract the anion to the surface. So first, let me show you what we got at this potential of zero total charge. So already when the surface charge is like 0, you see that there is an heterogeneous strain distribution. So essentially, you get a tensile strain in certain part of the surface. You get compressive strain in other part of the surface. And well, does it make sense? So to get answer to this question, essentially, this is the work that Coherent did, and he compared the very same particle but at different scales. So by using DFT, he got an atomic scale inside, and by using molecular static simulation, he could like increase the size of the so-called slab. And what you see is that independently on the length scale, essentially you reproduce the very same strain distribution. So there will be like always an expanded bulk and a more compressed surface. So that was already extremely interesting, and that makes us confident in what we are measuring. What he found also is that, well, you can see this, there is no dependency on the nanoparticle size. What matters for the strain distribution is only the morphology of the platinum nanoparticle. So by changing the proportion of edges and corner, you will change the strain distribution. That explains a lot of what we are doing in electrocatalysis. Now, these are the results as a function of the electrode potential. So we increase from the potential of zero total charge, we go more positive. And what you may see on this particle is that the heterogeneity in strain distribution becomes more and more pronounced. So we got positive out of plane strain developing on this top and bottom facet, and the edges and corners are becoming more and more compressed as the electrode potential is increasing. You can better see this on this histogram of surface strain distribution. What you see is that in average, like the histogram of strain at the edges and corner is like broadening, and it's shifting negative. So we are compressing the edges and corners. And for the rest of the facet, there are different behaviors. So for example, the side facets are a little bit compressing, and the top and bottom facet are expanding when we increase the electrode potential. So everything is very heterogeneous, and there is a different behavior in every different location of the particle. We actually found the second level of heterogeneity by isolating the surface voxels and the bulk voxels. So what we found is that, well, on the surface, everything becomes heterogeneous, as you may see. But in average, the surface atoms are slightly compressed. And what you see is that as a response to this compression, the bulk atoms are just like expanding. So in a way, we reproduce the findings of Isaac Martins, Paffel, and Jacob, like we do see the particle breathing. Then there was a question for several months, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it like we have expansion of this top and bottom facet because of the preferential absorption of anions at the edges and corners? Or is it like we do have preferential absorption of anions in this region, and that causes the compression of the edges and corners? Well, I think a good answer to this question came from this cross-section here, where we first cross a corner atom, then we cross the top facet, and then again one edge atom. So what you may see is that there is an increasing inward displacement of these edges and corner atoms, and this leads to increasing strain distribution heterogeneity and expansion of these atoms here. Now, if you do the same, for example, here, so you first cross one edge atom, the very same top facet, and another edge atom. Already, by comparison, you see that like there is much less heterogeneity, and things start to develop at 0.46. So you need to get to a higher potential for things to start to move. So in our opinion, that was a good proof that essentially the corners are driving the game, and they are causing the expansion of this top and bottom facet. We got also a very nice confirmation from the work of Corentin by the FT, where it could show that the anions are in average preferentially adsorbed on edges and corners. So you see there is like very negative absorption energy for the sulfate atoms on the edges, on the corner, sorry. And there is almost 0.2 eV versus the 001 facet, and almost 0.4 EV. This is huge compared to the 101 facet. So we think that we have this preferential absorption of anions on the edge, and that causes an expansion first of these atoms here. And again, as a response, there will be a compression on the neighboring atoms. So here again, we see this heterogeneity in strain distribution, but this time at the atomic scale. And that brings me to the conclusion. So for the first time, we made in situ electrochemical BCDI. We investigated the adsorption of anion. This is one of the very simple process in electrocatalysis. It was impossible to enter the surface oxide region, neither the hydrogen adsorption region, but we are progressing continuously. So I think many things will emerge. We have seen heterogeneities in strain distribution at all scales, atomic scale, surface scale, and differences also between the surface and the bulk. So the particle is like literally breathing, electrochemically speaking. So we have different probably reactivity at every different site. And finally, what matters a lot is the complementarity that we have seen between in situ BCDI and the DFT or the molecular static simulations. Where essentially people in the group are convinced that you cannot gain any fundamental understanding of what you are measuring with BCDI without this theoretical calculation. And I thank you for your attention, and I would be very much pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fred, for this very nice talk. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, great work. I have a short question. I mean, you measure only one tender component of the strain. Yeah. So now when you see some strain, this could be either because you have like the unit cell really contracts, or it could be because it compresses in one direction, expands perpendicular to that. Yeah. So is there? So that's the first question. Is there some way to measure the all tender components of the strain? And second, of course. Is there a chance to expand it into the range of platinum oxidation?
Okay, so first question. Yeah, we were working only along one direction. And actually, well, this is, we think, what happens. So obviously, we get information into this displacement along the 001 direction here. And so we get this information, this we are sure. We are sure about this movement of the corner atom in this direction. And actually, these things, what happens because of the Poisson effect. We think that this movement in plane leads to another expansion of the atoms out of the plane. So there will be always like a compressive in plane strain and a tensile out of plane strain. So to confirm the scenario, obviously we will need to go to multi-Bragg peak BCDI, and I think it's possible. But so far we didn't have enough mean time to work on this. Answering the second question about the surface oxide formation, yeah, that was the objective initially. But essentially, what turns out is that this model system is good. But it's also frustrating because I don't know if I wrote it somewhere, but essentially what happens is that when we enter this potential region here, we start to locally corrode the glassy carbon support. And so the particles start to move slightly, very small movement, as Matthias had shown, like this particle moving on the carbon support. And this is even more true on glassy carbon, which is rather flat, atomically speaking. And well, we are just losing the particle, or it's tilting or moving, and then we are losing it. So then we are just like searching for the particle like crazy, and then we find the particle and we're like, oh, I found it again. But then we are not sure this is the very same one. And so, yeah, we are just losing. So for this region, I think it will be complicated. For this region, it's possible. We already made it, and we made it also for palladium to see the hydrogen session.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Very nice work. I mean, on your comment of movement of particles on a support, I mean, it's always hard to understand, and people never believe that it's possible that on room temperature particles with oxidation reduction really start to wander around the support. With your data, is it possible to model now what, I mean, these are relative large particles, right? The small, I mean, how the wetting on the support actually changes under this load from higher to lower potentials, and how that contributes to migration on the support.
Yeah, I see the point. If there is any like weighting, if the equilibrium shape essentially will change as a function of the electrode potential. Well, Clément probably can better answer, but we didn't see any change in morphology. But I think this is due to the fact that, as you say, these particles are very large. They are 300 nanometers, so there are a lot of atoms to move to see any change in the equilibrium shape. Maybe this is true for small nanoparticles. Now, there was a comment about like the movement.
Yeah. I mean, if you.
Oh yeah. I think mostly also what I'm convinced is that the interactions that we have with the support are very weak. So maybe you won't see this change in equilibrium shape because the interactions are very weak. This is very different from, for example, gas phase catalysis, where they have particles sitting on metal oxide. There you have very strong interaction with the support. Here we are mostly in the range of van der Waals interaction, and this is the reason why the particles are moving and why they are not moving in gas phase catalysis. So Marie-Ingrid group is making gas phase catalysis as well, and they suffer not very strongly about these changes in particle location.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone.